During the Christmas season, Bruce's childhood friend, Martha, had an unfortunate accident and broke her leg. With no one to care for her, Bruce decided to bring her home and asked me to help look after her. Without a word of complaint, I tidied up the guest room, preparing for Martha's arrival. But as I was cleaning, I stumbled upon something unexpected. A collection of letters spanning over 40 years exchanged between Bruce and Martha. More than 500 letters chronicled their nearly 5-decade-long entanglement. In those pages, Bruce poured out his longing, his devotion, and his love for Martha, their words brimming with intimacy and passion. Reading those letters, my heart pounded with a mix of shock and clarity. The marriage I had once believed to be solid and fulfilling had, in reality, been riddled with cracks from the very start. And I knew a forced love was never meant to last. So when Bruce brought Martha home, I met him with a calm resolve. Looking him in the eye, I said, "Let's get a divorce. You were unfaithful for this marriage, so you leave with nothing." By the time Bruce brought Martha home, I had already calmed down. I sat quietly in the living room, watching as he pushed her wheelchair inside. They both had smiles on their faces. Bruce, the ever-gentle scholar, exuding an air of intellectual refinement. Martha, despite the cast on her leg, carrying herself with the kind of effortless grace that made people take notice. If ever there were a perfect embodiment of the phrase, "wolves in sheep's clothing," it was the two of them. I stared at them, thinking how, if not for those letters, I would have never suspected that my nearly 70-year-old highly respected professor of a husband was capable of such betrayal all these years. Nor would I have imagined that Martha, the celebrated artist praised for both her talent and character, would willingly play the role of the other woman for decades. Bruce's smile faded the moment he noticed me sitting there. Annoyance flickered across his face as he asked, "Why are you just sitting here? Did you finish preparing the guest room? Is dinner ready?" That cold indifference, that commanding tone, he wasn't speaking to me like a wife of over 40 years. No, he spoke to me the way one would speak to a maid, issuing orders without a shred of care. Our marriage had always been like this, unequal. Bruce gave commands, I obeyed. He never smiled at me the way he did at Martha. With me there was no warmth, no tenderness, only demands. My nose stung, but I held back the emotion. I had spent hours sitting here, sorting through my thoughts, accepting what I had always tried to ignore. And yet, even with all that acceptance, the pain was unavoidable. I was human after all. I had feelings. I had married Bruce when I was just 20 years old. 48 years. Nearly half a century, I had devoted myself to this man, this family. And this was how he repaid me. Bruce's frown deepened when I didn't respond. "Did you not hear me? What kind of attitude is this? Sitting there like a statue in front of our guest. Do you have no manners?" From her wheelchair, Martha watched our exchange with a faint, almost imperceptible smirk of satisfaction. Then in a soft, concerned voice she said, "Bruce, is Debbie upset about taking care of me? I don't want to be a burden." Bruce's irritation melted instantly. With a bright, reassuring smile he replied, "Don't be silly, Martha. Why would she mind? She's just a housewife, she has nothing else to do all day. Of course she's happy to help." I almost laughed. When exactly had I ever said I was happy to take care of her? Whatever lingering attachment I had for Bruce evaporated in that moment. I looked at him, at the man I had spent nearly my entire life with, and saw him for what he truly was. The veneer of respectability, the charm, the intellect, it was all stripped away, leaving only the ugly truth beneath. There was nothing left of my love or admiration for him. Only disgust. "Bruce, if you want to take care of Martha, do it yourself. I have no obligation or responsibility to help you. And there's something I need to tell you, we're getting a divorce." I spoke each word slowly and clearly, leaving no room for doubt. Bruce froze as if I had just slapped him. His finger trembled as he pointed at me, disbelief written all over his face. You must be out of your mind." I let out a cold laugh. "No, Bruce. For the first time in my life I'm thinking with absolute clarity. I want a divorce, and I want it now. For over 60 years, I had been the obedient wife, never stepping out of line, never failing to meet his expectations. The sudden declaration of divorce was something Bruce simply couldn't process. "Debbie, what is this nonsense? You're upset about taking care of Martha, is that it? If you didn't want to, you should have just said so." His voice carried feigned exasperation, his attempt to twist the situation so that I was the unreasonable one. As if my supposed cruelty and selfishness were the only reasons I would dare speak of divorce. Martha immediately put on a pitiful expression, her eyes shimmering with false remorse. I'm so sorry, this is all my fault. If I hadn't broken my leg, you two wouldn't be fighting. Bruce turned to her with a reassuring look. This has nothing to do with you. Debbie is just having one of her episodes at her age. Don't worry about it, Martha. Then, without even looking at me, he added dismissively, if you don't want to take care of her, fine, I'll hire a nurse. Martha, let's go. Without a second thought, he turned the wheelchair around and started pushing Martha toward the door, completely disregarding me as if my words had been nothing more than a passing tantrum. I raised my voice. Bruce, make time to go to the courthouse. We need to file for divorce. Oh, and we'll need to discuss the division of assets as well. Bruce didn't acknowledge me. He simply walked away with his precious Martha, leaving me behind like an afterthought. I carefully packed away the decades' worth of letters between Bruce and Martha, took them with me, and headed straight to a nearby law firm to consult a lawyer about the divorce. After reviewing my evidence, the lawyer informed me that if the proof was solid, there was a possibility that Bruce, as the unfaithful party, could walk away with nothing. We talked for over an hour, and by the time I left, I had a clear plan in mind. Bruce had shown no mercy, but I wouldn't be as heartless as him. Not for his sake but for our children. Eddie and Sandra had built successful lives of their own, each with thriving careers and families. I didn't want this divorce to turn into a public spectacle that could affect them. As long as Bruce agreed to the separation, I wouldn't go out of my way to destroy him. I stored the evidence in a safe place, took a copy of the drafted divorce agreement and returned home. The moment I walked through the door, I saw Eddie and Sandra sitting on the couch, their expressions grim. Eddie was the first to speak, his tone sharp with frustration. Mom, what the hell are you doing? Why would you suddenly ask Dad for a divorce? A cold wave swept through me as I looked at my son, the child I had raised with my own hands. The child who now spoke to me as if I were the one in the wrong. Sandra chimed in, her voice carrying an edge of disbelief. Dad told us you're leaving him. After all these years, why? Is that really necessary? I clenched my fingers around the divorce papers. They didn't know. I couldn't blame them for their reaction. But soon they would. Bruce and I were going our separate ways. Once that happened, there was no doubt he would marry Martha and the truth would come out anyway. I might as well be the one to tell them first. Your father cheated, I said, my voice steady. He and Martha have been having an affair for decades. I won't sit back and tolerate it any longer. I'm divorcing him. I had poured my love into these children, raised them with care and believed naively that they would stand by my side. I thought they would be furious on my behalf, that they would call Bruce and Martha out for their shamelessness. I was wrong. Eddie furrowed his brows. Mom, we've known about Dad and Aunt Martha for a long time. They were deeply in love back then, but circumstances forced them apart. Aunt Martha never married, she's been waiting for Dad all these years. Isn't it natural that he still has feelings for her? My breath caught in my throat. Sandra nodded in agreement. Mom, given Dad's status, it's normal for him to have close female friends. You've spent your whole life as a housewife. You don't share his world, don't have deep conversations with him. To be honest, you were never really a good match for Dad. You do know he was forced into marrying you, right? She looked at me with something almost like pity. You're making a big deal out of nothing, she added. Dad and Aunt Martha are just close friends. They never did anything to betray you. Do you really have to stir up trouble over this? If I hadn't seen Bruce's letters, I might have believed them. I might have fooled myself into thinking he and Martha were truly innocent. But how could they be? 40 years of tangled emotions, 40 years of holiday getaways spent together, 40 years where Bruce never once brought me flowers, never gave me a single thoughtful gift, yet he showered Martha with presents. He never remembered what I liked, but he knew Martha's preferences like the back of his hand. I had always assumed this was something just between Bruce and Martha, a secret they kept from everyone. I had thought my children, like me, had been kept in the dark. But now I knew the truth. I looked at Eddie, then at Sandra. My voice was hollow when I spoke. So, you both knew? You knew all along. They nodded in unison. Eddie was the first to respond, shifting uncomfortably. Mom, we didn't mean to keep it from you. We just didn't want to upset you. Dad's a respectable man and Aunt Martha isn't some random woman. We trust their character. They wouldn't cross the line. Sandra quickly chimed in. Mom, stop making a fuss over nothing. This isn't the time to throw a jealous tantrum. Think about the family. Think about us. Stop talking about divorce like it's some casual thing. I nearly choked on my own breath. My husband's betrayal was painful, but my children's reaction was unbearable. This was worse. So much worse. Had I really raised them? Had I really spent my life pouring love into two children who now stood here, defending the man who had humiliated me? Eddie saw the rage darkening my face and tried to smooth things over, speaking in an overly patient tone as if I were a stubborn child. Mom, I get it. You're upset. But what does it change? You have no job, you've been out of touch with the world for decades. How are you going to survive on your own? Sandra nodded in agreement. Exactly. You've had a comfortable life with Dad. You never had to work, never had to worry about money. What more do you want? Comfortable life? I let out a laugh. Cold, bitter, mirthless. I had never lived a comfortable life. I once had a promising career, but Bruce's parents were in poor health, and he needed to focus on his work. So I gave it up. I stayed home to take care of them. Then we had children and I devoted myself to raising them. By the time they were grown, there were grandchildren to look after, school pickups and drop-offs, meals to cook. For 60 years I had never lived for myself. I had always been someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's grandmother. Never, not once, had I simply been me. And I had never complained. I had believed, foolishly, that my sacrifices were seen and appreciated. That my love was understood. But to them I had been enjoying life. Tell me, what kind of luxury is waking up before dawn to make breakfast? What kind of privilege is scrubbing floors, washing clothes, running errands, preparing meals day after day, year after year? In 40 years I had never traveled, never seen a movie in a theater, never attended a concert. I was nothing more than a glorified maid, and even maids at least got paid. I had nothing. I stared at my children, my face frozen in an expression of utter disbelief. Eddie, sensing he might have gone too far, softened his voice. Mom, look, if you don't want to take care of Aunt Martha, that's fine. Dad can hire a nurse. Just don't make this into a big scene. You've lived here for so long. Do you really want the neighbors gossiping about you? Gossiping about me? They thought I was the embarrassment? Eddie continued, just call Dad, apologize, and let's move past this. My hands trembled.